Good evening, everyone. It's Gordy Canuck here, and you are watching Act One, a Canadian take on news events. And tonight, in a bit of therapy for myself, I decided to go ahead and do my live video that I had planned going back to yesterday. After learning some news about the Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood, BC, which, as I understand it, is an hour or so away from Kelowna, BC. That's the largest population center, from what I understand. I myself am in southeastern Ontario. Danny, thanks for showing up, my friend. Danny was watching my earlier video. I did a very short video passing along the sad news that Candy, the wonder dog, uh, my five and a half year old Border Collie Aussie Shepherd mix went to her reward. She is no longer with us. She had liver damage and neurological damage, likely caused by a toxin. And I'm going to leave it there. It's going to be tough, but I say this is therapeutic. This is one of the things that I do. I enjoy my YouTube channel. I would enjoy having Candy right here at the start of them, but onward, onward. There is interesting news going on about the Universal Ostrich Farm. As a matter of fact, I just read an article affirming what I had heard through social media sources. Um, and I'm going to read that what I read, the news reporting on it. But before I do, the usual, you're welcome to like, share, subscribe if you're curious about this story. I don't contend to be an expert on it, but I do have some thoughts, some views, and some opinions on it that some might consider my views controversial. Oh well. Here's the news. Now, this is being reported by a radio station in Kelowna, BC, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the largest population center close to this Edgewood, BC. Um, and I'm not even sure how to pronounce the name of the woman who owns the farm, but I'll do my best. Katie Pass Passan Passan Passantes Nays Passat uh, her voice trembles as she describes the news her family received from a high ranking government source. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA, is preparing to move on their ostrich farm for a cull within days. And then it quotes her as saying, "We have the information from an extremely credible source higher up," Passatney said during a Tuesday morning interview. So this is less than 24 hours old. She's been told a Vancouver and Surrey task force is being assembled to assist the CFIA in the destruction of the nearly 400 birds. "He told us to get mentally prepared," she said. "The CFIA is choosing destruction over discovery," end quote. The Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood has been locked in a 9-month battle with the agency over the cull order. This ordeal has escalated into an international controversy that has drawn support from high-ranking U.S. officials. Many will know that includes RFK Jr., another U.S. government health official, Dr. Mehmet Oz, or Dr. Oz, who used to host the TV show. And the family, their argument is that their ostriches have developed natural immunity after surviving the initial outbreak of a strain of bird flu, that it's been 231 days without any symptoms of illness in their flock herd of birds. They've proposed innovative solutions, including reclassifying ostriches from poultry to red meat flightless birds, which could remove them from strict poultry regulations. Cassidy criticizes what she sees as bureaucratic inflexibility, describing the situation as a precedence war, where the CFIA, this Canadian Food Inspection Agency, where they fear setting a precedent that other farmers might challenge their authority. The farm has received collaboration offers from the Food and Drug Administration and the National Institutes of Health. Those are American agencies, but Canadian authorities remain unmoved. We are not a commercial poultry farm, Passionné emphasized. The legal battle reached a crucial point during a recent appeal hearing in Ottawa in July. But in late August, the Federal Court of Appeal rejected the farm's bid to prevent the cull, which was originally ordered by the agency last December. A little side note, my understanding is that the only thing the Federal Court of Appeal was concerned with was whether or not CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, whether they were following the rules, the protocol, whether they were operating within their legal framework. They didn't judge as to whether this is a cull is the right decision or the wrong decision. All they said is that is, that is the purview of the Canadian Forces, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. That is their purview, and we're not here to sit in judgment of their decision. It says located 135 kilometers from the nearest major city, which I believe is Kelowna. The farm argues that its location that its isolation minimizes any public health risk, and the family has been prohibited, and this is interesting, the family has been prohibited from independently testing their birds, further frustrating their efforts to prove the animal's health. And this is something I'm going to talk more extensively on. I find this alarming that the family has been prohibited. This is according to AM 1150, a news talk radio station in Kelowna, BC, probably owned by Post Media or Can West or one of the other major players. At any rate, international support has poured in from unexpected quarters. The Trump administration, Dr. Oz, RFK, have all expressed concern, with Kennedy writing 2 letters supporting the farm's research initiative. I'm asking from Trump, from people like even Elon Musk, just speak out, Passionné pleaded. This isn't about optics anymore, and this isn't about precedence. This is about doing the right thing. The CFIA said the cull is necessary, quote, they provide a link here, because exposed flocks create an opportunity for the virus to mutate. On its website, the agency said, quote, specific operational plans and dates will not be shared with the public in advance. I think the cull could be moving forward as early as tomorrow. As enforcement appears imminent, the family refuses to surrender what they see as decades of scientific progress and irreplaceable genetic resources. We're not a surrendering family. We are a fighting family, Passionné declared. There's still time for them to do the right thing. And that was, again, the reporting out of a radio station, a news talk radio station in this area, 135 kilometers away, Kelowna, the biggest major city. What I found most alarming in that article, and I'd seen this written before, is that the owners of the ostrich farm have been prohibited from having the birds tested independently, which they would want to do in order to prove that the animals are healthy. And this brings us to the whole issue of asymptomatic spread. And this ties into the COVID era. because everything we experienced during the COVID era was largely predicated on the notion of asymptomatic spread. And just to put a fine point on things for anyone unfamiliar, I don't think many are at this juncture, but there might be one or two. The asymptomatic spread is basically this idea that an individual who is healthy, that is to say, exhibiting no symptoms whatsoever of a disease, any disease, that they can be a carrier of that disease and that they can pass it on to others. There are two terms that come into play. One is asymptomatic and one is pre-symptomatic. Someone may be asymptomatic for a time, and then you get into all kinds of questions like incubation period. I'm infected, but I'm not displaying symptoms. So I have whatever the bug is floating around, but it hasn't expressed symptoms yet. However, and this is the incubation period, how long until those symptoms are expressed and I appear sick. So there's pre-symptomatic and then there's asymptomatic. Completely asymptomatic refers to a person who is healthy, not sick, showing no symptoms, and who never develops symptoms at all. And it is contended in everything that I read that asymptomatic has been observationally studied and modeled. And in the material I see presented from authoritative figures, there is no question as to whether or not asymptomatic spread exists. I know that during the COVID era, it was a hotly debated topic. Can a healthy person be infected and spread a disease asymptomatically? And what I recall reading at the time during COVID was that no studies had been done, no clinical trials had been conducted on this because of ethical concerns. I am tested and am determined to be infected with a viral pathogen. Then, in order to empirically test the asymptomatic spread, what I understand would have to happen is that I would then have to be exposed to 10 individuals or 20 individuals, or at least a number of individuals who have tested completely clean, no disease, and it would have to be done in a controlled fashion to limit other contacts and to see then whether any of these completely healthy people get the disease from a person who likewise is healthy but who has tested positive. And the problem with doing such a study is that you then would risk potentially infecting a healthy person. And the narrative around COVID when it came out was the deadly coronavirus. So, are you going to risk exposing a healthy individual who has tested negative to what it has been deemed the deadly coronavirus? That made it impossible to conduct any such tests, from what I understand. I'm not a medical expert, so if anyone wants to challenge me on that, I will welcome it. I would ask you to cite, give sources. What I have read is that there have been observational studies done that have determined that asymptomatic spread does exist. But my question would be whether or not was that done in a controlled fashion? Because if it's just observational population wide and people are going about their day-to-day activities, I have to question how can you empirically know the source of an infection? You have a person who was healthy, tested negative, they become sick. Was it because of transmission from an asymptomatic person? Was it due to transmission from a symptomatic person? Was it due to aerosol transmission? Was it due to fomite transmission? Contact, someone touches their mouth, touches a table, then a healthy person comes along, touches the same table, then wipes their eyes, nose, mouth, chain of transmission. If it's just an observational study with no controls in place, with no rigorous protocols to ensure you can definitively and empirically state what the chain of transmission was, then to my mind, it strikes me as guesswork. I don't know if Danny or anyone else has any thoughts on this. If you're watching this later, you can comment in the comment field. But what I think we're going to see happening could be tomorrow. I think it's probably within days. Is we are going to see the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, their operatives, their employees, their agents, descending upon this universal ostrich farm with quote unquote what I will call backup. Maybe it'll be the RCMP. I expect there to, or perhaps BC Provincial Police. I don't know. But I'm expecting an armed presence there because right now in Edgewood, BC, at the Universal Ostrich Farm, there are a number of individuals who have camped out and are there, protesting and are there to, I don't know to what degree they will go. Would they try and obstruct Canadian Food Inspection Agency employees from going and euthanizing these birds? Might they try to physically obstruct them? I don't know. I do have a degree of familiarity, not a great deal. I know one individual at the farm. His name is Jim Kerr. He has quite the large social media footprint. I met him on a few occasions during the COVID era. And I don't have any opinions on him one way or another. He's got a good social media presence. He drives a vehicle that he refers to as the bubble bus, this bus that has a bubble machine built into it. And I met him during the COVID era. I've mentioned him before. I don't think I've ever done a video specifically on the Universal Ostrich Farm, but I know I have mentioned it before. But the one thing that strikes me is the whole rationale behind culling these 400 or whatever the number is, hundreds of ostriches that are seemingly healthy. The rationale behind culling them, euthanizing them, is due to the potential that they might be carrying a variant strain of this avian bird flu. And so there you have one hypothetical. They could be, perhaps, maybe carrying a mutated strain of this avian flu, which has led to millions of chickens anyway being culled all across North America. There have been massive culls, particularly in the United States. And so they could have it. And then, because this is an outdoor farm, the ostriches are in contact with wild birds. And could then an ostrich at this farm with this hypothetical mutated strain of the bird avian flu then infect a wild bird? That bird then goes and flies to a poultry farm somewhere and then infects a flock of chickens. And this whole idea that bird flu, I forget H5N1, I forget the numbers, there are too many out there now. So I just call it avian flu or bird flu. That this bird flu, as it moves from ostriches to wild birds to chickens, other poultry, that mutation The fear is that a strain may become more virulent, more deadly, more pathogenic, and potentially maybe even be able to jump from poultry, from chickens to human beings. And uh, I have to ask the question, are we operating on empirical science or on fear-based worst case scenario science? And I don't want to straw man this. I don't want to make it sound like those who are advocating for the cull that they're weak and stupid or anything like that, because there is perhaps some merit to this idea of an ounce of prevention. And yes, maybe this is horrible, and maybe these birds aren't healthy, but can't the old question of can we take the chance? That was what drove so much fear during the COVID era is, well, I can't take the chance. What if? Now, I wanted to share likewise a letter that came supporting the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. And this was published to the Vernon Morning Star. Vernon is another city in British Columbia. And the headline, this is August 10th, says that local residents condemn MLA, member of the Legislative Assembly, Morissette, and MP Scott Anderson's support for farm. And here's what it says. This is a letter to the editor, basically. Written an open letter to member of the Legislative Assembly, that's the provincial government in BC, whose name is Morissette, and MP, that's a federal MP, Scott Anderson. And the letter says, your support for Universal Ostrich Farms in their fight against the CFIA order to cull their flock of contaminated birds is inappropriate and unfortunate. Now, I'm going to take exception to one thing. They've said the birds are contaminated. That is their point of view. But if you're not allowed to test the birds to see whether or not they're contaminated or not, it's somewhat open to question. But the letter goes on. It is good that you try to help constituents, but your support was not honestly acquired. Universal Ostrich Farm has been spinning their tail for a long time. CFIA, the Food Inspection Agency, is not in the business of destroying small farms or disrupting the food chain. They protect our food supply and those who produce the food. Their work also assures other countries that buy our agricultural products that they are getting safe food. And this is an important point. No nation is an island. And I have to question openly if these birds or these ostriches, if they were allowed to live, could there be international ramifications? Could there be other nations, could other countries then decline to import Canadian agricultural products out of fear, or at least poultry products? The letter goes on to say, the agency also tests products and regularly issues recalls when unsafe foods or mislabeled foods make it to market. Entering a known quarantine zone is showing support for people who are deliberately flaunting federal regulations. This is this writer's point of view. Elected representatives should be seen and heard to uphold all the laws of the country. Public safety should outweigh politics. And this is the thorny issue. When it involves health, it's like everything has to be on the table. We saw that during COVID. Yes, it's unfortunate that we have to ask the abused to shelter in place with their abusers. However, it is necessary given the overwhelming, that's a smaller problem than the greater problem of COVID. And the open question I have to ask is, let's just say because I do not think this will happen. I do not think there will be a stay of execution for these ostriches. I think we are going to see in a day or two or three. I think it could be tomorrow. I think when they warn them that we're looking at days, they may move quick before the Universal Ostrich Farm has an opportunity to prepare, catch them, when their guard is at least somewhat down before they've had a chance to fully prepare. And I think they're going to move in maybe tomorrow. And I expect some type of paramilitary presence, some type of armed presence there to ensure that the order is enforced. But let's go down an alternative universe and say that the birds were spared. And we find out that in the months, years to come, there is no spread. There was no need to cull the birds. That calls into question, that would call into question the whole rationale behind quarantining the healthy, both in animal populations and in human populations. Going ahead and culling this herd of ostriches in a fashion, I see it as vindicating everything that happened during the COVID era. Well, you have to you have to impose these kind of draconian measures because the alternative is devastatingly far worse. So we have no choice. And it's all predicated, everything was predicated during the COVID era on healthy people with no symptoms, and many who never developed any symptoms ever went to places like drive-in testing clinics, were told they were positive, and then they were quarantined, and then the entire world was in quarantine. Unless you were an essential worker, which at that time I was. I was in the military at the time, working at a radar station. So I could risk my life over the deadly coronavirus by going into work. But everyone else, stay home. If you worked in a grocery store, you could risk your life. If you worked at Walmart, Home Depot, if you worked at one of the if you worked at the Golden Arches or any other major food chain with a drive-through window, well, you could go in and be with your coworkers. The Ontario provincial government, when COVID came down, March of 2020, the government of Ontario issued a list of over close to 300, I believe it was like 290 or so workplaces that were deemed quote unquote essential. So anyone working in those 290 workspace environments, you still had, no COVID emergency relief benefits serve money for you. You've got to go, according to the news, you've got to go risk your life to hand over a Big Mac and to ring in someone's purchases at Walmart or at the grocery store. It was insane what we went through. But this bird farm, this ostrich farm in BC, if they could show that their birds are healthy and that they're at no risk of spreading this virus, they won't even allow, according to the article published by the news radio station out of Kelowna, they are not even allowed to have independent researchers come in and test the herd to see whether they have anything. Why is that? I have to wonder. One of the individuals who is supporting the ostrich farm is a man who was recognized before COVID as Canada's leading expert, or if not the leading expert, one of this nation's leading experts in vaccinology. I'm talking about Dr. Byron Bridle from the University of Guelph. And he he went off script with the recommendations that were coming from health officials. And this is an individual who, it should be noted, Ontario's Ministry of Health in April, May, June, early 2020, they funded Dr. Bridle's lab at the University of Guelph to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars because they wanted his expertise. They wanted his opinion, his expert opinion on the vaccines that were under development back April, May, June of 2020. So April, May, June, he's recognized as a leading expert, leading Canadian expert in the field of vaccinology. Then he goes off script and he becomes a quack. And he had no Twitter profile, no social media footprint whatsoever. And what happened is Twitter accounts started to appear that basically were designed to make someone named Dr. Byron Bridle appear to be a lunatic, fringe, quack moron. They weren't his accounts. He didn't have, again, a Twitter, Facebook. He doesn't have a social media profile. So some individuals or some players went out and tried to create this false impression of Dr. Byron Bridle's Twitter account, Facebook account, web page. They even made a web page for the man. Whoever did it was willing to spend some money and a lot of time and manpower, resources on slandering Dr. Byron Bridle. And of course, they never find out who. Never find out who. It's like on YouTube now, you see ads being put forward that are obviously AI generated of Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney touting some AI type investment vehicle. And they mentioned the Royal Bank of Canada. And it, to my mind, it is so blatantly fraudulent because I can tell this is AI, and I've seen articles stating that this is AI, and I've seen articles further stating that they're trying to find out who is behind this. You mean to tell me Google doesn't know who's advertising on their platforms, that someone can engage in fraudulent activity on a platform like YouTube without getting caught? But those ads, you're still seeing them. And they've appeared on my station as well. We are living in crazy times. And this Universal Ostrich Farm is probably going to blow up in the news in the next day or two, 3, probably this week, when Canadian Food Inspection Agency employees descend upon it. And I'm betting that there will be some type of paramilitary type contingent there with them. Maybe the RCMP, maybe someone else, but I expect them to be armed in order to enforce the order so that these ostriches can be euthanized. And then we'll never know. We will never know. Did they have antibodies against bird flu that maybe could have been harvested and then used to develop efficacious treatments or inoculations so that other population? Will never know. We will never know because they're gone. The birds are gone. For what it's worth, I was curious to know how this Universal Ostrich Farm made its money. So I did a search, and according to AI, Gemini, you do Google search now, and you get AI. Danny is writing, and I'll put it up on the screen. Danny is writing that it's just more government overreach. We need to change this liberal government now. I would like to see Pierre Poilievre weighed in on this. I can understand why he does not. I read you the letter from an individual who was writing in support of the CFIA, and they're here to protect us, and these are government regulations, and we have to do as we're told. And there is a significant element of the population who is like-minded with that. And it's easy to it's all the way out in British Columbia. So, and it's not in Vancouver, it's not in Victoria, it's not even in Kelowna. It's 135 kilometers away from Kelowna. It's a backwater, middle of nowhere place where this is taking place. So it's easy for a large segment of the population to just push it away. That might change. I expect that there are, like I said, this Jim Kerr has a large social media presence, and there are other individuals there as well, and they'll have their cell phone cameras going. And I expect, at least for social media, to get flooded with images of what and video of what takes place. I expect it will get at least some coverage in the mainstream. How much? We will see. I expect that the mainstream will push the government-approved narrative heavily, the same way that they push the government-approved narrative heavily during the COVID era. This idea that the idea that SARS-CoV-2 was created in a lab has been debunked, we were told. And the fact that the COVID jabs, that they, were anything less than, incredibly safe and effective. Any claims to the contrary, the mainstream narrative was to say that they were debunked. The mainstream narrative was to tell us that ivermectin, that it was horse paste. That was the approved narrative. Danny's writing that it will be a blip on the mainstream radar unless they push whatever agenda they want. What coverage it does get, I expect that it will, that is what will happen. They will push the approved government narrative that this was absolutely necessary, required, essential to protect the health and safety of the good Canadian people, the food supply, and to prevent the potential of a mutant strain developing that could infect the human population and run rampant, blah, 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 blah. We will see what happens. If I will make a suggestion, I'll wrap things up at this point. I will make a suggestion. Keep your eye on social media. If you do see videos being shared about what takes place, social media videos of what takes place, Jim Kerr is one example. Look him up on Facebook. Then I will encourage you to further share those out, because without a mainstream network type tech presence pushing things, it's very difficult for things to get exposed. You need a big player. I've spoken many times about the lie put forward by Alberta Health Services when a young child, 14 years of age, died of stage 4 or final stage inoperable brain cancer. And rather than that, what Alberta Health Services, they mischaracterized his death as being due to COVID. And the only reason it got huge traction is because a significant media player, the Western Standard, they are an alternative media outlet, but they have a decent footprint. They pushed the story in nice, news article, nice professional format, and it got shared virally. And that led Alberta Health Services to issue an apology, to say, well, we made a mistake. It was an error in judgment. But if it hadn't been for that Western Standard article, Albertans would have still believed that that 14-year-old died of COVID instead of what he actually died of, which was terminal final stage brain cancer. think they call it stage 4. I forget how many stages there are, but he was in the last stage and he was receiving end of life care. He was in a palliative care setting, probably on a morphine drip for pain and just to keep him as comfortable as possible. And then just days before his fully expected death, they did a nasal colonoscopy on him, or the PCR test, and then they tried to blame his fully anticipated cancer death on COVID. And it was only because the Western Standard ran that up a high flagpole. The only thing is now, when an outlet like Rebel News or Western Standard covers something, Canadians, we're not allowed to share it because of the Liberal government, the Carney Liberal government. They have a bill in place that makes it difficult, if not impossible, for Canadians to share news stories on social media platforms like Meta. And so, but that prohibition does not extend to guys like this Jim Kerr, Jimkerr. Check him out on Facebook. He's probably also on Twitter. And you're going to have to help me out. What are Koch's postulates? It's got to be a rule, a standard. I know I've heard it before, but I can't bring it to mind exactly. This is about if you took away the notion of needing to quarantine the healthy, if you took that away in 2020, then everything falls apart. The simple fact of the matter is, you can check back in the news articles from 2017, 18, 19, every flu season, large urban hospitals were getting overrun. 150, 180, 200% capacity happening all over the place in Ontario and Quebec and elsewhere. Hospitals having to treat patients in the waiting room, sitting in chairs because there's not even a bed available. The hospital's overwhelmed with flu cases, and every year, 2017, 18, 19, every year, yeah. People got the flu, it happens, they get really sick. 2018, I think it was, 8,500 people had their deaths attributed to influenza, the flu. And that was done at a time when they weren't testing everything that moved. And and then counting every death with a positive test as a flu death. They never did that before. That was a new thing under COVID. And I'm going to allow this. I'm not one for profanity. I engage in it on occasion. I try to keep it off my channel, but I'll put this up quickly for Danny. I agree. Okay, here we go. Koch's postulates are a four-part framework for establishing a causal relationship between a specific microbe and a disease. I'd have to read more on that. That's probably getting back to what I was saying earlier about how do you know for sure that, okay, I remember in Kingston there was an esthetician nail salon where they said that they traced through epidemiological contact tracing, they traced an outbreak of COVID to this specific nail salon. And the question I asked at that time is, did they track the movements of all the people who went into that nail salon? Did they know what grocery stores they went to, what Walmarts they went to, what Home Depots they went to? Because the only places that were doing contact tracing were churches were required to do it. A small little esthetician would be required to do it. Well, you didn't have to put anything down when you went to the grocery store or to Walmart or to Home Depot. Those places didn't require contact tracing. So if you're only looking in one area, that's the only area you're going to find anything. Maybe those cases, if there was an epidemiological contact traced chain, maybe they originated at a Walmart or a grocery store, at a place where people weren't writing down their contact information. At any rate, I prattled on long enough, almost 40 over, going to be over 45 minutes. Thank you for watching. If you like the content, you're always welcome to like, share, subscribe. I'm not sure when I'm going to do my next video. They're going to be more regular now. Um, Got to try and get through this. It's tough losing a dog. I've done a fair bit of. I'm a little numb at this point. Gone through the emotional roller coaster already, and I'm sure I've got more to come as you encounter things. Her brush, a treat, a toy. Amazing dog. Anyway, but again, thank you for watching. Sarah, thank you. We'll be good. I'm amazed at how well my young guy is taking it. Talk to him about the stages of grief, anger, bargaining, denial, and how you can flip from one to the other you know, and not to get stuck in anger. Anger is the most dangerous one, at least in my view. And that finally, the final stage is acceptance. But there's always going to be some grief. It fades over time. Sharunian left a message on my last video, hoping I'll get through it. We will get through it. I've been through, sadly, I've been through even worse. A pet is a part of the family, but a mother, a father, aunts and uncles, they have more. Anyway, God bless, and I'll end it the way I normally do. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and even in troubling times, whether it's what's going on in BC or personal turmoil like with me losing a family pet, his hand is there, and he will grant you peace. So Jesus is king. Remember that. And we'll talk to you all again in a night or two or three. I'll probably will go live if this does blow up the way I expect it to. Anyway, talk soon. Thanks, guys.